Returning to Egypt. Before this story, we learned about how Joseph waited patiently in prison. He was finally able to interpret dreams, which eventually promoted him to be second in command. Joseph was put in charge of preparing for the coming famine, which would eventually spread throughout the entire land. Now we will learn about how Joseph's brothers went to Egypt to buy grain during that great famine. However, they were unable to recognize Joseph, inspired by the book of Genesis. Just as God had revealed through Joseph, the famine spread like wildfire throughout the land. Blighted and desolate, farmlands became barren, and livestock starved and died. It came like a plague, and the entire countryside fell in despair. Egypt, however, was able to withstand the fatal famine. As Joseph instructed, 1/5 of all that was grown the past 7 years were kept safe and distributed carefully. Across the plains towards the north, Jacob and his family hurt from the famine. Their food had become scarce, and the family had no choice but to look to Egypt for help. Israel looked at his sons, doing nothing, and said, "Why do you all look at each other?" he asked. "I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there so that we may not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers journeyed south to Egypt. But Israel did not send Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother, for fear that he would be hurt as Joseph was. The sons of Israel ventured forth to Egypt, not knowing they would be coming face to face with their past sins. Joseph was the governor over the land and oversaw all transactions between other countries and the grain. A long line of people stood before Joseph, pleading for food. Joseph peered across the sea of faces and caught glimpses of his brothers. Waves of memories began flooding back to him. Memories of being thrown into a pit, shackled and shipped away. He recognized them instantly, but they stood before him with no clue of who he really was. When they stood before him, Joseph treated them like strangers and said, "Where do you come from?" He spoke with a rough voice, reeling from the emotions of seeing his betrayers again. "From the land of Canaan to buy food," they answered in a tone of reverence, for they were speaking to the second most powerful man in all Egypt. They bowed before him. Instantly, a rush of images flooded back into Joseph's mind. The dreams he had once dreamed of his brothers bowing before him, now coming to fruition. Joseph did his best to compose himself. "You are spies," he said crossly. "You have come to see the vulnerability of the land so you can take it," he pointed to them. They trembled at Joseph's accusations. "No, Lord," they shouted. "Your servants have come to buy food, and that is all. We are sons of one man, and we are 10 of 12. One brother is at home with our father, and the other is dead. We are honest men, we promise." Joseph scoffed at the sound of them claiming to be honest men, knowing full well what they had done to him. Joseph decided to test their claims by keeping them captive until one of them brought back their youngest brother. For 3 days he held them in custody. Joseph's heart ached every moment he was in the presence of his brothers. On the 3rd day Joseph came to the brothers and said to them, "I fear God. Do this and I will let you free. Let one of your brothers remain here while the rest of you take grain to your father. Then bring your youngest brother back to me so I can verify your claims." The brothers did exactly as Joseph ordered. They began packing, afraid of what would happen next. God began to work in the hearts of the brothers. They spoke among one another, saying, "We all know why this is happening to us. We caused our youngest brother Joseph pain and suffering, and he begged us to show him mercy, but we did not. Now we are being punished by putting Benjamin at risk." Reuben, the oldest, answered them and said, "Did I not tell you to leave the boy alone? You didn't listen. Now God has required a reckoning from us for his blood." All the while Joseph was listening, for they did not know that he spoke their language because he used an interpreter. As the brothers continued packing, Joseph turned away and wept alone. In secret he looked to God, his heart breaking over what he was doing to his brothers. Yet a part of him did not trust them enough to reveal himself. Wiping away his tears, he came back to them. He took Simon from them and bound him in ropes in front of his brothers. Joseph gave orders to his servants to give his brothers their money back in the bags of grain. He also ordered for them to be given extra for the journey home. Though Joseph was cross with them, he would not show them the same cruelty they once showed him. The brothers loaded their donkeys with grain and departed swiftly. On their way home they discovered money was returned to them. Instead of being glad, they trembled, feeling unworthy and uneasy about the blessing. "What is God doing to us?" they asked themselves. They returned home to their father and told him everything that had happened, and how they needed to bring Benjamin back to Egypt to get Simon. Israel was furious at his sons. "You are stripping me of my children," he yelled. "Joseph is gone, and now Simon is gone, and you expect me to give you Benjamin?" Reuben could no longer stand himself. As the oldest, he was responsible for all his brothers. He stood firm and said, "Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring them back to you. I will not let them fall." "If anything would happen to my boy, I would surely die," Israel said, for he had already endured so much pain from Joseph. So the family delayed in leaving for Egypt again. The famine had grown more severe, and Israel's family had gone through all their grain. He gathered his sons again and said, "Go again to Egypt to buy us more food." Judah replied, saying, "We were strictly warned to not come back without Benjamin. The governor needed proof that we were not lying and needed us to bring him back, or he would kill Simon. Send him with me. He will be my responsibility." Their father relented and sent his sons with Benjamin and many gifts of honey, gum, myrrh, pistachios, and almonds, along with double the money. So the men took the gifts, Benjamin, and double the money as before, to stand before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he ordered his servants to prepare an extravagant feast back at his home. When the brothers arrived to meet Joseph, he was not present. Rather, his servant invited them into his home. Fear overcame the brothers, for they fully expected to be punished because they took the money back with them. They climbed the stairs that led to Joseph's house, anxiously wondering what would happen to them next. They expected to walk through the doors to Joseph sitting on a throne, ordering the guards to behead them. They finally approached the entrance of Joseph's home, opened the doors, all to find a royal welcome. Joseph had his servants take their coats, wash their feet, and give them water. The brothers apologized for taking the money back to their home. Joseph smiled and said, "Peace to you. There is no need to fear. Your God and the God of your father put that money back in your sacks. I received your payment." The brothers let themselves relax, and Simon was released to be with them. They waited for Joseph to return at noon and prepared their father's gifts to give him. Hours passed, and Joseph finally returned home. The brothers immediately bowed down to the ground when they saw him. Again the memories of Joseph's dreams came flooding back to him. He thought of his father, his mother, and his homeland. Joseph had so many questions for them, yet he did not want to let his guard down. "How is your father?" he asked while swishing a cup of wine in his hand. "The old man you spoke of before, is he well?" Joseph did his best to not seem too concerned. They bowed their heads still, not answering. Joseph saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son. "Is this the youngest brother you spoke of?" he asked. He looked into Benjamin's eyes. He had his mother's eyes. How he missed her. He missed his father. He missed Canaan. Joseph could feel himself losing his composure. Tears began streaming down his stoic face. Joseph excused himself and wept in his room. Anguish, anger, bitterness, love, all these emotions overcame him. Joseph washed his face and came out again. Controlling himself again, he clapped to his servants and said, "Serve the food." And immediately an entire feast was brought out before them. He served every brother, though he did not eat with them. Yet he served Benjamin 5 times the amount as the others. Joseph wanted to see how the brothers reacted to favoritism towards the younger brother. Have they changed? Joseph must have thought to himself. They ate, drank, and were merry together. Joseph then sent them on their way with their grain. However, he put his silver cup in Benjamin's sack, so that he might trick them later. As the brothers packed up and began leaving, Joseph ran out to them. "One of you has stolen from me," he shouted. "Why have you repaid my hospitality with evil?" Joseph acted as the angry king, willing to behead anyone who defied him. He watched as his brothers trembled with fear. Joseph took a dagger and walked towards them slowly. Starting with the oldest son, working his way down to the youngest, he tore apart their sacks looking for the silver cup. When he came to Benjamin, he found the cup. He turned to his brothers and said, "You may all go your way in peace, but Benjamin will be my slave forever." The brothers tore their clothes and bowed before Joseph. "Please take me instead," all the brothers began to shout. They were willing to take the place of their brother so he could return back to his father. Joseph welled up at the sight of his brothers. They had truly changed. Now they were willing to lay down their own lives so their youngest brother could be saved. Joseph couldn't hold in his feelings any longer.